Hello viewers, welcome to the educational videos on GSTR-9 by ClearTax. I am CA Venugopal and with you in explaining some of the important checklist points which one user has to use it or review before filing the GSTR-9. And ClearTax has prepared a GSTR-9 checklist. As you are aware, ClearTax is one of the India's leading GST filing online cloud platform and which is being used by 15,000 CAs and around 1,000 enterprise accounts. So, moving on to the checklist which has been prepared by the ClearTax for filing GSTR-9. Let me now show you how to file the GSTR-9 using ClearTax, and the importance of today's educational video is how to use the checklist prepared by ClearTax before you submit your GSTR-9. If you log into your ClearTax account, you will automatically see the list of all the clients on your dashboard. Now, for the ease of it, I am simplifying and I am just picking one account. And if you go to your file returns section, you will see this new tab GSTR-9. Once you click on the new tab GSTR-9, you will get the dashboard of GSTR-9. As you click on the GSTR-9, the portal, ClearTax portal will automatically compute the liabilities that needs to be paid, what is the value which is there from GSTR-1, 3B, 2A, all the data is automatically computed. If you notice the data which is already available, some computation has happened. If you are a new user, you have a button called download data from GSTN. You click on this download data from GSTN, automatically the data from the portal gets downloaded. After you download, you can click on view status. You can see the list of the returns which got downloaded. For example, for GSTR-1, if I click for all the periods, say this being a quarterly return filer, so all the quarters it has downloaded. You might be noticing that the data download happened till March 2019. It is very essential when you are filing the returns for GSTR-9 2017-18, you would need the data of GSTR-3B and GSTR-1 and 2A till March 2019, because it is a transaction based reporting. Whatever the transactions which has happened in the period 17-18 is what you are reporting. Now, you can download all this data. Once the data has been downloaded, click on this green download GSTR-9 form button. Once you click on this, you will have this Excel automatically downloaded from the ClearTax portal. Now, let us look at the Excel. So, once you open the Excel, you will see the checklist. Today's focus of this education video is to orient you the checklist prepared by the ClearTax, and which I would recommend everyone should have it before they file their GSTR-9. What does this checklist talk about? This checklist gives a macro level a checklist before you file GSTR-9. It says please check these points before you finalize it. Let us go one by one. The first point in your checklist is GSTR-9 net tax payable including a reverse charge. So, the reverse charge liability is also a taxes needs to be discharged. Your tax liability is outward supplies plus inward supplies liable to reverse charge. If I have to look at GST liability declared in GSTR-9, your liability of GST in GSTR-9 has two components. One is other than RCM, the another one is RCM. Other than RCM is divided into three sections. You have the liability disclosed in table 4, you have the liability disclosed in table 10 and some liability adjustment in table 11. So, all this liability is captured. This liability is captured from IGST, CGST and SGST each section wise. Then we have liability on account of RCM. This can precisely be obtained from table 4G. Now, this liability both for 17-18, paid in 17-18 and 17-18 paid in 18-19 is obtained here. This liability is now compared with the taxes which have been paid. The tax paid is using input tax credit. This is obtained from table 9 and using cash table 9. Now, there could be some taxes of 1718 paid in 1819. So, that data is captured here in taxes paid in the subsequent period. User has to manually input for this if it is paid through GSTR-3B, and this would automatically be captured from table 14 of GSTR-9. Let me tell you, this checklist is after your GSTR-9 is prepared. Before you submit it, you are validating the data points in your GSTR-9 so that still there are any errors to be resolved. If the taxes are paid in the subsequent year in GSTR-3B or through DRC-03, that would be considered. And is there any balance taxes payable, or is there some taxes which have been paid extra? So, the first point to check is ensure is this nil before you submit. If this is not nil, do you have a reason why there is a balance which is appearing? So, the first point to check before you file your GSTR-9 is, are these values matching with your liability? Moving to the next important checkpoints. The next important checkpoints is the difference in GST liability payable and paid. What is the difference between liability payable and paid? The liability payable is disclosed in 3 tables: table 4, table 10 and table 11. Table 4 is liability of 1718 paid in 1718. Table 10, liability of 1718 paid in 1819. Table 11, the liability of 1819 got adjusted with the excess payment of tax of 1718. So, 4 plus 10 minus 11 is the gross liability you are disclosing in GSTR-9. The same is also disclosed in table 9. In table 9 you have a tax payable, in table 14 you have tax payable. So, whether the tax payable which is disclosed within GSTR-9 is it matching or not is compared. This is the one important. So, you need to know whether before you submit it, is there any between GSTR-9 errors. The difference between liability payable and the paid, the taxes paid in 9 and 14 and the taxes payable as per 4, 10, 11, is it matching? If it is matching, well and good. If it is not matching, you have a reason to show that there is some error. Now, this data, if whenever there is a gap, on the right side you will see a question mark. If there is an iota of doubt that looks like something wrong, we have specifically not marked it as an into mark. There could be a situation where this is right in accordance to you. So, this appears to be a doubt. So, if you feel that this is correct, you have an additional reference points and the comments you can enter it. So, how this data has been captured, you will find it in the reference for validation. If you have some notes or comments that to be entered, you feel in your view this question mark, it is a question mark, but for you it is a right. So, you will enter this in the comment section why this is correct. Moving on to the next checklist is difference in the liability as per books and GSTR-9. So, the checklist of the ClearTax beautifully also captured what is the data as per the books. So, you have the second tab of what is the book summary. So, the books summary can be entered manually in the data as per the books. What is the turnover between April to 7, April 17 to June and other adjustment? What is the turnover you think should be as per GSTR-9? Corresponding tax liability. This has to be manually entered by the users. Once the data is entered, this data is brought into the checklist. In the checklist, the liability as per books and liability as per GSTR-9 is compared. If there is a gap between liability as per books and liability as per GSTR-9, the difference would appear. Now, you would have to manually check that why there is a gap. It is not necessary that liability as per books should be as per GSTR-9 is not what we are saying. But however, ideally that is the taxes you would have paid either in 17-18 or 18-19. If there is a gap here, then you have to give your explanation or comments. Either you change your GSTR-9 accordingly, or if you feel that this is correct, you give your user notes for your reference. In fact, this checklist has been prepared considering your future assessment or GST audits. Even the GST auditor would do the same work, or then the assessment happens, the assessing officer would ask the same question. You have a user note section where you can give your comments why there is a gap. This question mark would always remain as a question mark as long as the numbers do not match. But if the numbers match, you will automatically find this as a tick mark. Looks like this is a good to go section. So here is the third important check, difference in the input tax credit claimed between GSTR-3B and GSTR-9. In GSTR-3B, you have the table 4 where the input tax credit is claimed. So whatever the input tax credit claimed in GSTR-3B is brought here. You have between 6B to 6H, which is summed into 6I, is also brought here. Ideally, whatever the credit you have claimed in 9 is what should be, whatever the credit you have claimed in 3B is what the credit you should be having in 9. But if there is a gap between these two, the tool would say that looks like you are trying to claim an additional credit in GSTR-9 or you are trying to reverse some credit in GSTR-9. So this tool will bring the error note here. Now there are many aspects of the checkpoints, but what right now I have explained you is 3 main important checks before you submit your GSTR-9. Apart from this, there are a lot of other checklist checkpoints which have been built into the tool. Let me move on to some other important checkpoints which have been built onto the tool. First, these are the miscellaneous checkpoints. Checklist item 4, which is relating to the outward supplies and its GST liability. You might be wondering that why so many different liabilities, because there are different liability sections. Here we are attempting to compare whatever is the liability you are disclosing in table 4 and table 5 read with table 10 and 11 vis-a-vis in table 17 the HSN wise summary. If there is a gap between the HSN wise summary and the above reported tables, unfortunately all these validations are not available in GSTR-9 or you will not know. We are trying to bring whatever is the checklist you should be having in the tool. So you would have this data brought here and you will see that there is a gap between your HSN wise summary and the other aspects of GSTR-9 table 10, 11 and 4, or the other way of saying table 9 and 14, wherever the liabilities are. If there is a liability gap, that is brought in. So you will see what is the reference points which being used. Here the reference points used is table 5N minus advances, because 4F talks about advances. Advances wouldn't have been in HSN summary compared with your table 17. If you have a reason why there is a difference, you can enter the reason in the user notes. Moving on to the next checklist is the again liability, but this time this the liability is on account of reverse charge. Ideally, the reverse charge liability should be disclosed both on account of registered and unregistered purchases. Now, if you notice your GSTR-2A table 4, it has the data of all registered purchases. It is expected that the liability on account of this should automatically gets captured. If you are reporting in your table 4G is lower than this, then the system says that looks like there is an error and that is captured here. So this is from 2A registered purchase reverse charge vis-a-vis what is reported in 4G. Ideally, the value in 4G should be higher than whatever is reported in 2A. The next item in the reconciliation is on the inward supplier side. So there are 5 checkpoints on the inward supplies. Let us look at 3 points on ITC claimed. The first checkpoint is the difference in the total input tax available versus availed. So, other than imports RCM, basically this is all the forward charge credits which generally available in 2A. So, this is comparing with whatever now you are disclosing in your table 6B of GSTR-9 vis-a-vis what you have already entered in table 4A5 of 3B. So, in GSTR-9 table 6 you have the reporting same like 4B reporting. So, this point table 6 checklist of point number 6 is comparing the 6B versus 4A5. If there is a gap between these two, you will automatically get a question mark here. So, hypothetically, if this value, the input tax credit in 4A5 is 43,719 and the GSTR-9 entered value is a different figure, it will automatically give a checklist saying that looks like there is something wrong. The moment this number is matching with whatever is there in the GSTR-9, you will automatically see that the checklist is becoming green, saying that it is valid and matching. Next item is the liability GST input tax credit on import of goods. It is not to be read as liability, but it is ITC on import of goods. So, the ITC on import of goods is as per 3B versus as per 9. So, if there is a gap between these two, so the reference point is table 6E of 9 and table 4A1. If there is a gap here, this would be again highlighted as an error. The next input tax credit is ITC availed on ISD. Input service distributor credits are ideally to be reported in 4A4 of 3B. This is compared with table 6G of GSTR-9. If there is a gap, again it would be reported as an error. So, these are inter-reconciliations between two different reports which are entered. Then in table 8, there is an IGST which is getting lapsed. So, whatever is the IGST paid on import of goods which is claimed in table 8 versus the ITC availed, ideally this should match. If any IGST on import of goods is getting lapsed, it is an attention one user has to know, that is also has been brought as a checklist. So, these are the three checklists on the input tax credit availed. When it comes to the input tax credit reversed, there are two checklists which have been added. One is ITC reversals. The ITC reversals is captured in table 4B of GSTR-3B. Similarly, in GSTR-9, the ITC reversals are captured in table 7I. Now, the summation of all the reversals made in 9 is compared with 3B. If there is a reversal which is there in 3B and the reversal is not there in 9, you will automatically get the gap that there is a reversal which is missing. But however, you should note that the reversals are to be done as per 3B. You cannot reverse a new credit in GSTR-9. Next checklist is difference in the GST amount shown as ineligible. You have the ineligible credit which automatically captured in 8F basis your 8D. 8D is the gap between 2A versus the credit availed. Now, this gap could be on account of ineligible credits or unavailed credits. User have to manually enter in 8F how much is the credit which is going to be lapsed on account of 8D difference. Whatever the user who is entering in 8F, this is now compared with GSTR-3B reversals. In 3B, user is going to enter under 4D what are all ineligible credits. Those ineligible credits are tracked and parked here, that so much is an ineligible credit which has not been availed in the GSTR-3B. Moving on, the last part of the checklist, this is for documentation purpose. This is not technically for the liability calculation. However, one needs to have a tab on this. First, the difference in GST input tax credit under reverse charge, which is under 2A, versus whatever is claimed. It is expected that whatever is the reverse charge liability which is paid has to be claimed. If someone has not claimed, this portion will say that looks like there is an error. In 2A there are registered purchases. Table 4 of 2A will show how much is inward supplies liable for reverse charge will be reported. It is expected that 6D should have the same value. Whenever there is a gap in the value, it would show that there is an error. Next, the liability which is declared in 2017-18 and paid in 2017-18. So, this is attempting to compare the liability basis GSTR-1 basis the ITC utilized and the cash paid. So, in GSTR-1 table 5, which is talking about the total liability declared in 17-18, paid in 17-18, this is now compared with the input tax credit which have been utilized and ITC which has been paid through cash, the liability paid through cash or credit. So, the both are compared. So, even in GSTR-3B, equivalent table 9 of GSTR-9, the input tax credit utilized towards cash and the credit towards liability is now compared with whatever is the liability in the books which are being disclosed. The next difference is liability for 17-18 reported in 18-19. If one says that the liability of 17-18 has been discharged in 18-19, this data should get reported in table 14 of GSTR-9. But the data which is reported in table 14 of GSTR-9 should be a reconciliation between 10 and 11. So, one has to manually be entering the value in 10 and 11. So, this point the tool attempts to reconcile all the amendments which happened in GSTR-1 in 18-19 pertaining to 17-18. So, the tool is trying to capture all the amendments which have been done in GSTR-1 and reporting it here. As I said, this is like an additional information. You might have an error in 1 and you have paid taxes correctly in 3B. So, you might still say that okay, this error is valid, but this is an information saying that there is a gap between the corrections you have done in GSTR-1 in 18-19 for 17-18. The next difference is the exports and supplies to SEZ which are disclosed in GSTR-3B and GSTR-1. There is a turnover which is disclosed in GSTR-3B, which is precisely 3(1)(b), which is talking about export related turnover. The same is also captured in table 6 of GSTR-1. So, both this data is reconciled, seeing whether does it match, and in GSTR-9 the table 4 the exports with payment of taxes and table 5 exports without payment of taxes, those sections are also compared and reported if there is any gap in this section. Moving on to the next point of the checklist is difference in the GST liability declared in GSTR-9 and paid through reverse charge under 3B. So, here is an attempt made to capture whatever is the taxes which are paid in 3(1)(d) of 3B under reverse charge column and what is the taxes which are reported in 4G of GSTR-9. If there is a gap in between these two, what is the gap and how much is the gap, that is also attempted to reconcile. And the last part of the checklist is on the late fee. So, if at all there is a return not filed in time and there is a late fee going to happen, so it is automatically presented saying that the return is going with the late fee. Since you are downloading from the portal, the ClearTax portal, whenever you download, there will be a checklist which will capture the difference and it would get reported. This Excel file is not just a checklist. What you have seen so far is the summation of the data which is extracted from various places. What are the various places? You have books summary, you have a detailed GSTR-9, what is going to be submitted, and the GSTR-9 form in detail, the GSTR-9 which is auto populated from the government portal, the HSN wise summary which is entered, gap between GSTR-1 and 3B, GSTR-3B and 2A, summary of GSTR-1, YTD data of GSTR-1, YTD data of GSTR-2A, YTD data of GSTR-3B. From all this data, your checklist is prepared. So, one user is not preparing anything in the checklist. This checklist is extracting all the data from 2A, 3B and 9, comparing what are the relevant information one needs to see before they file the GSTR-9. If this is matching, well and good. So, before you file your GSTR-9, I would always recommend that you should have a checklist, because once you file your GSTR-9, there is no way you can amend it, and you have to face this with the assessing officer if there are gaps. So, better be prepared that if there are gaps, you analyze why the gaps exist, have a valid reason for those gaps and file the checklist. You can easily navigate all these sheets which I have given using the table of contents, and anytime from the respective sheet you have this table of contents, you can easily navigate back, and I am sure when the data is provided in an Excel, users would always have an easy access, understand from how the informations are coming. So, this video is all about orienting the users of ClearTax on how GSTR-9 checklist works, and understanding the fields, the source of information data coming for the checklist, and how do you use the checklist. So, this is a season for GSTR-9 filing, and I am sure whatever the queries you have on GSTR-9 has been addressed in most of our educational videos. You can refer them, and this checklist gives you an easy guidance before you file your GSTR-9. So, with this, I thank the viewers for watching this, and happy GSTR-9 filing.